with Wes Hagen. I am your host, Wes Hagen, and I'm the winemaker and brand ambassador for J. Wilkes Wines and the Miller Family Wine Company. We make Ballard Lane. We also make Smashberry and as well as barrel burner wines. And I mostly focus on J. Wilkes here on my show. This is, I believe, the fourth week in a row that we have been coming from you from our beautiful studio here in Santa Maria Valley, California, in my office. This will be yet another reason why I tell my my tax preparer that we can take this square footage off of basically off of our taxes, because here we are doing all this stuff. What's the show about? Well, the show is about wine and a little bit about the secrets of wine, a little bit about human flourishing as it uses wine as an example, how wine has influenced mankind. I take a very anthropological view of wine. One of my greatest influences is Dr. Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania, which I always mention is an Ivy League school. So when you name off your Ivy League schools, don't forget Pennsylvania, because man, they do some wonderful work, including having Dr. Patrick McGovern in their employ, who is currently by far the most vaunted sort of ethnobotanist and scientist on the history of wine and how we can check that out. So today, welcome. It is the 27th of April, and I am actually going to expand this so I can see questions and who's coming on. Yes, Christy's back. So nice to have you again. And happy Monday to you. I'm hoping, as I mentioned on my Facebook page, that after a long weekend, I will not forget how to day drink on camera. So Zach and Peter, so welcome. So glad you're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I'll be explaining this again, I'm sure, at 5 o'clock. It is 4:48 currently. But today we're taking on aromatic whites. We're going to talk a little bit about vintage history and a little bit about the history of Pinot Blanc at J. Wilkes. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some other varieties. We are going to do white Rhones here next week, as I just remembered. So I'm putting this bottle of Viognier off to the side, even though I consider Viognier one of the most aromatic varietals. Generally, I would put it in the Rhone white category, although if we need another wine to taste and we've got some extra time, I will certainly do that. So Mondays, we usually choose sort of a general wine topic. Wednesdays, we talk a little bit more frequently about vineyard management and winemaking and some stuff that winemaking can help. Phil and Marla, very nice to have you guys. Oh, it's a beautiful day to be drinking Pinot Blanc, isn't it, Christy? And the Rogers family and the Blairs, welcome, welcome. So glad you guys are all here. So yes, so we're doing aromatic whites today. We're going to talk a little bit about your favorite aromatic whites, what they can pair with, where they come from. Talk a little bit about Muscat of Alexandria, which is one of the more ancient white varieties that has that sort of character. We talk a little bit about Muscat and why it's called Muscat, which is kind of an interesting story, which I actually got to learn firsthand as someone who is mildly allergic to bee stings. So we'll talk a little bit about the production of aromatic whites, pairing aromatic whites, and then we're going to drink some of my wine. I'm going to definitely go through a little bit of Pinot Blanc again and talk a little bit about why I love Pinot Blanc so much, a little bit about the passion I have for the varietal. And then I brought out something kind of special, a 2012 Joseph Swan Gewürztraminer. So I thought this would be a good wine just to open up and to do a little day drinking with. I hope it's bone dry. I really do. Knowing Joseph Swan's style and the style of the house, I would be pretty convinced and pretty surprised if this wasn't a bone dry Gewürztraminer. My blood sugar is running a little bit high, so I wasn't really going to go with beer today, because beer tends to it's generally 7 to 70 carbs, depending on the style of beer you're drinking. The worst type of beer for me to drink is a big, heavy, what they call a pastry stout, which is the actual the beer world's name for these incredibly heavy, sweet stouts that might include the flavors of horchata or chocolate, peanut butter, and this cork is toast. So I'm going to do my best on camera while still being semi-entertaining to do that. Wow. And I see one piece of cork. So is the wine corked? Yes, but no. So natural cork, maybe that's a cool, I would love to hear. John, Colosi, 17, Nero de Avila. Wow, I'm so curious where they got the grapes. I want to know. And welcome, Dominic. I'm so stoked you here. 103 out. Goodness gracious, 103 in April, that's too warm. I remember in Santa Rita Hills, we got 107 in May during one of our Santa Rita Hills festivals, and we all went out to go play golf. A bunch of winemakers and geeks went to go play golf at La Purisma, and we ended up with like towels on our head. Welcome to the cool climate viticulture of the Santa Rita Hills. It usually is, 60s and maybe low 70s in that time of the year, but it got so darn hot. So yeah, 103 is too much. For me, I live in Santa Maria Valley, so basically I begin to melt if for any reason the temperature goes over about 80, 85 degrees. Yesterday was about 80, and my wife and I were out and about and having some good times. We walked the neighborhood very carefully and 25 feet away from any house, human being, dog, cat, you name it. We're being incredibly careful here and moving right along. Okay, I've got a question from Marla, and I'm always and Rachel Martin, welcome. So nice to have you. Is Pinot Blanc related to Pinot Grigio? Yes, they're both genetic accessions. Remember, we use the correct term, genetic accession. We don't use the word clone because there's no such thing as a clone in the world of grapes. Clone 667, clone 777, they're genetic accession 667, genetic accession 777, genetic accession Pomard 4, because really grapes do not breed true to type. This is really important to understand. Tomatoes, they breed true to type. Cannabis, true to type. Grapevines, every time a bud breaks, the shoot that comes out of that position is genetically distinct from not only every other shoot on that plant, but every other shoot on the planet Earth. 30,000, give or take, genes in the genomic structure of Vitis vinifera, the forest vine that makes wine, makes a lot of wine. And so the genetic accession of Pinot Grigio and Pinot Blanc are two genetic accessions where Pinot Noir, minding its own business, was struck, one vine, likely in Burgundy, was struck by solar radiation, and that those basically cosmic rays do horrific damage to DNA, or they can. So normally, whatever happens, constantly, everything is every shoot, every vine, every shoot on every vine is going through massive genetic mutation, both during dormancy and during the growth cycle. So as we are seeing solar radiation breaking down little parts of the genomic structure of grapevines, of Pinot Noir in this case, the vine automatically engages in repair mechanisms to basically randomly insert certain what's the name of it? Certain gene structures, like all the little letters that pair. Those letters are basically randomly put in, and it heals the DNA. But that is a random mutation. So that random mutation hits any part of those 30,000 genes. It's really normally not going to mean a damn thing. There are so many genes on that genomic structure that if they're disturbed, nothing really happens to the morphology or cluster structure or the flavor of a grape. But some do, and some have a massive effect on it. And that would be what happened one day. Who knows? I don't know if Pinot Blanc is recognized as being an older variety than Pinot Grigio. Pinot meaning the pine cone shaped cluster, tight conical cluster. Pinot Noir, of course, being a black or purple variety. The black cluster that resembles a pine cone is about the best that's good. Is about the best that we can get to on that. And then Pinot Grigio, of course, or Pinot Gris, the gray Pinot. And if you've ever seen the grapes, they do have a look. If you see them from a ways off, you think you're looking at white grapes that have been decimated by powdery mildew, because powdery mildew looks very gray. So you see these, honestly, they're kind of like a golden gray color, these ripe clusters. All clusters start hard and green, and as they mature, they go through what we call veraison or fruit softening, and then they gain the color that they'll have at harvest. Generally, Pinot Grigio has a gray cast to it, and Pinot Blanc looks just like Chardonnay clusters. Very difficult. Maybe the cluster architecture is a little tighter, a little smaller. Chardonnay, I believe, has some Gouis Blanc. Gouis Blanc is one of the major progenitor grapes that was developed in the Languedoc in sort of post-Roman, sort of late medieval into the Enlightenment. Is in this area was sort of the cauldron in southern France, was really the cauldron for the experimentation of varieties, many of which we have today through there. So the idea that I read, though, that Pinot Blanc was developed in Burgundy, stayed in Burgundy, and was actually part of Domaine de la Romanée-Conti till 1956. DRC, Romanée-Conti, the most expensive red wine in the world, was 10% Pinot Blanc until 1956. Pretty interesting to know. Doesn't that make it into rosé, putting 10% of white grapes? Believe it or not, putting 10% of a white grape into a red grape fermentation causes a greater accumulation of color than if the white grapes weren't there. Why? Well, I can show you why. Next time you spill red wine on yourself, take a little bit of white wine and rub the stain. What you'll notice is it works almost as well as any type of commercial cleanser you can use, including peroxide, OxyClean, Wine Away. White wine works really well. And we've got about 2 minutes. So I have one quick last story about how white wine gets red wine out. And that is, I was at a tasting, and there were two women who were working at the Lily Coffee stall at Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits to keep us all caffeinated. So I went over and got a double espresso, and it was delicious. And we had a conversation. This woman was so nice. I told her how big of a coffee geek I was. She gave me a can of the Illy coffee, which I thought was awesome. And then so I brought her a little bit of red wine, and she took one swirl, and she was wearing this beautiful white, like silk blouse, or maybe it wasn't silk. Boom, red. I'm like, I can fix that. I ran over to the nearest table, which was an Italian distributor. I put out my glass, and I'm like, Prosecco, please, the driest Prosecco you have. And he's like, well, we've got the four Prosecco. Let me tell you about the reserve, because I can tell you are a winemaker, you want to taste the best. So in the Prosecco, you have the grapes. And he started going on, and I was just looking at this woman freaking out, two booths down. Excuse me. Jay Wilkes does not talk about booths. Jay Wilkes talks about tables. So there was a table a couple down, and I finally got this Prosecco after getting, a 20-second, 30-second description, which was beautiful. How Italian men can speak. Went over there. We poured some of the Prosecco on a thing. I was like, please do not let this guy see that I just got some of his $45 Prosecco and I'm using it as a cleanser. But we did get that Prosecco on that red wine stain as quickly as we could. And she was so happy she gave me another can of coffee. So that was about it. We have 4:59. So if your glass is not full, ladies and gentlemen, you better make sure it's full, because it's Monday. I had a whole weekend off, and I am full of something in vinegar, and I'm ready to rock. Speaking of golden liquids, this is not a sample. This is actually an amazing wine that I'm actually starting off tonight with. I am breaking all the rules. I'm going to the oldest, funkiest, driest wine on the table. This wine, not only does it have low residual sugar, I don't think it has any residual sugar. It's in a really beautiful place. 5 o'clock, here we go. Welcome to Day Drinking with Wes Hagen. Let's all raise a glass, take a nice big sip, realize all things in life are transitory. All things in life are transitory. In through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth. We are good. We're feeling good. We're surrounded, hopefully, by people we care about. We're communicating with people we care about. We're getting a little bit of a break. We get in these rote things. We get in those sort of ruts in the road. And sometimes you have to pop out of those ruts, and the popping out is a little bit jarring. So I'm jarred, but not pickled. But we'll work on that a little bit, right? Right? Okay. So welcome to Day Drinking. Aromatic wines, 427.20. Let's talk about it. I figured I'd just jump into a wine today, because I'm not drinking beer right now. In this very moment, I know that you're all, yeah, right. 2012, Gewürztraminer, Joseph Swan, 2012. So I'm always getting cool gifts of wine from people I love and folks that are styling me on all of these wonderful wines. I want to say this wine came from Ron Randrup at American Wine and Spirits. If you know Rock and Ron, if you don't know Rock and Ron, you should. One of my best friends in the world. So this is from the Sara Lee's Vineyard. No, it is not some place that produces cake. Sara Lee's Vineyard is in the Russian River Valley of Sonoma County. So we're talking cool climate Gewürztraminer, and a wine that's 8 years old. And I would say a Gewürztraminer is probably never saw a barrel. I'm saying this is probably stainless steel. Now, people love to talk about lychees, the flavor of lychee in wine. This wine reeks of lychee. This wine reeks of slightly green pistachios. It also smells a little bit like somewhere in between a very faint aroma of like fusel oil or diesel, and it's diesel at perception. Like if you said diesel, I'd go, yeah, I get it. I mean, what you've got is a little mercaptan in the wine, which means it had sort of a reductive environment, so it created a compound that can smell a little bit like road tar, can smell a little bit like tire rubber. It can smell, if it goes bad and goes into like a dimercaptan phase, you're really screwed, and then it's going to start smelling like garlic and onions. Mercaptans are something we try to avoid by giving wine a little bit of oxygen. It's one reason why we don't starve every wine from all that oxygen, because the more reductive a wine gets, the more funky it gets, the more mineral it gets. But sometimes the funkiness, you've got to weigh your options. So I like to make wine in a reductive environment, but then maybe do something to aerate the wine, or to even introduce a small amount of copper sulfate early in the fermentation, so it arrests the creation of these reductive molecules and compounds. And that way, when the wine is finished fermenting, just like we rack off the sediment, the dead lees, the dead yeast cells, we're also racking away all the residual copper. So the wine is fresh, bright, fruity, reductive as well, but there is zero residual copper sulfate in that wine. It's a great suggestion for home winemakers who don't have all the lab materials to know exactly how many parts per million they may be adding. The legal limit is 1 part per million copper sulfate. And if you added a 1 part per million copper sulfate into a wine as you're finishing it, you're going to have some residual copper. Generally not that bad for human beings at that level. But if you do it at the very beginning of fermentation, when it's just juice and you add a little copper to the juice, basically you're very, very safe. So for your home winemakers, I would always say, if you're going to use copper sulfate, make sure you have really good measuring tools and you use it pre-fermentation. And this is true. We're jumping right into a Wednesday conversation about winemaking and viticulture, but very, very, very important to understand, that the way that aromatic wines are made, you have to be really, really careful. You want to encourage a cold fermentation. A longer, colder fermentation in this process will maintain more delicate floral and fruit aromatics. And quite honestly, you're not going to sell an aromatic white wine in the market unless you basically have the opportunity to show it in the market and let it show an amazing amount of aromatics, fruit, bright floral character, and all that stuff. Now, this wine, as an aromatic white, as an 8-year-old Russian River Gewürztraminer. Do you know the Traminer? Well, Traminer was a grape from Italy. So what happened during the Roman era, especially in the era of Julius Caesar, who was the first Roman that allowed the growing of grapes for wine to occur over the Alps. Until Julius Caesar's reign, all wines had to be grown below the Alps and had to be basically imported into the areas and grown in Italy. Basically, Traminer, when they brought the grapes over the Alps and started and allowing these regions to start producing wines for the Roman Empire and for themselves, what you ended up happening is the lean character of Traminer took on an incredibly spicy and aromatic character in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and everywhere else in the modern world where the borders are that we recognize. So what ended up happening is the Germans, if you know anything about German, I actually have 2 years of college German, which I've basically forgotten because I never get to practice it. Why didn't I take Spanish? If there's any youngins watching as your parents are drinking, they're not day drinking, by the way. They're day drinking. Study Spanish. French, German, Russian, maybe Chinese. Chinese seems a much better choice than German, but Spanish would have been absolutely the best thing I could have done to myself. All right, so what we're going to do today, I'm going to start with the 2019 Pinot Blanc that we tasted last week, and it's been under the repour preserver. So there is a very, very, very proprietary material within this that is released when I took the little decal off the top, and it lasts about 2 to 3 weeks. If it's only one bottle, theoretically 1 month. And then I switch them from bottle to bottle for about 2 to 3 weeks. And when they stop working, I throw them out, put another one in. They're about $2 each, and it's a hell of a lot easier than buying a Coravin and having to buy, I would guess that in my experience, Coravin has cost me over $3 a bottle to Coravin, because I Coravin a couple bottles, then put my Coravin away, and then I forget about it, and I come back to it, and boom, it's out of gas. So another $10 cartridge, use it a couple times, back in the closet, forget about it, go back to it, empty, another cartridge. So I kind of got sick and tired of that. One thing I will mention about this beautiful, beautiful Joseph Swan Gewürztraminer is the color. You can really see after about 7.5 years in the bottle that the wine has definitely picked up a very strong golden color. So golden color in a wine can show aging. It can show sugar content. It can show oxygen ingress during fermentation. If a white wine gets too much oxygen during ferment, it will turn gold. It can also be oak. Remember, whiskey goes into the barrel crystal clear like water and comes out brown. So that brown color that you get out of whiskey, tequila, that light golden color is picking up as the alcohol is basically pulling a little bit of color and flavor out of the barrel, is going to affect it too. I'm pretty sure this is stainless steel, so this golden color is really having no impact from anything but oxygen. The wine is not oxidized. The wine is freaking gorgeous. This is one of those wines that needs like an hour, delicious things, and someone you really love to understand. This wine is a treat. So nutty, so spicy. And in the mid palate, there's this like tingling acidity that almost approximates the flavor of capsaicin. Spice, like pepper spice. There's something to this wine. It's extraordinary. I wish I could share it with all of you right now. Cool. So we're going to jump right into some Pinot Blanc, and we're going to talk a little bit more about your favorite aromatic wines. If you want to share with me where you are, what you're drinking, what's going on, I will be checking kind of what's going on the comments just as soon as I have the opportunity to go through these wines, take a little break, and then we'll talk a little bit about more aromatics. All right. Well, I have to say, after drinking a wine that was absolutely golden, this one is almost super light straw. So that's, I would say, brilliant clarity, super light straw. What does it matter that you can make these comments about wine? Well, we're going to do a whole show on taking tasting notes and why it might matter. And I will remind you guys right now, too, as we're tasting this 19 J. Wilkes Pinot Blanc that has not yet been released. The 18 is in current release. But I'm so excited about the 19 coming out. After almost a week open, I'm getting the slightest hint of oxidation in this wine. It's moved from like peach, like bright, fresh peach flesh, to peaches on top of a little dab of peach yogurt. So it's that slight lactic sweetness, and it's not lactic acid because this wine has no malolactic fermentation. It's all malic acid. And it's blowing off, which is always a good sign. Number one, if your wine stinks, swirl it. If your wine stinks during fermentation, mix it. Oxygen does amazing things of picking up the volatile compounds that are making a wine wrong and making them go into the sky. Sometimes oxygen doesn't do anything for the compounds produced by oxidation, obviously. So if a wine you can't swirl a sherry and turn it back into wine. But you can take a wine that has a little bit of volatile acidity, a little VA, or even a tiny bit of ethyl acetate, and get it into the bowl of the glass, and then let it blow off. I love Pinot Blanc. Why do I love Pinot Blanc? And we've tasted the 19. Well, in my previous life at Clos Pepe Vineyards, I was proud with my wife to make the first that I know of, and no one's ever challenged me on this. So I guess, 20 years later, if no one's claimed, I guess I can claim. In 2000, how was 2000 20 years ago? Wow, that's like a whole nother life. So in the 90s, I was single, and in the 2000s, I was married. So I asked my wife to marry me on New Year's Eve, 99 into 2000. Sorry, Eric Asimov. I know that's not actually the 21st century. That would have been 2001 because there's no year zero. But when I did ask my wife, basically 20 years, my wife and I started in 2000 making stainless steel Chardonnay at Clos Pepe, and we called it Homage to Chablis. And we decided right away, because actually I have some connections in Chablis, and it's one of my favorite wine regions, that we would we would just call it Clos Pepe Chardonnay and just leave the label clean. No homage to Chablis, nothing on the back that says homage to Chablis. We thought, honestly, the greatest homage we could give to Chablis is to leave the word Chablis the hell off the label. We've done an amazing job ruining the reputation of Chablis France here in the United States as a result of the labeling of cheap, uninteresting, mostly Chenin Blanc from the San Joaquin Valley as a Chablis wine, which had residual sugar and almost no acidity back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. The idea that Peter Vella can still call his wine Mountain Chablis is just it's kind of criminal. I mean, it's not Chablis. Chablis has to be from Chablis. Champagne has to be from Chablis, from Champagne. And if Marsanais started calling themselves the Marsanais of Santa Rita Hills, they wouldn't, because why would they? They're Marsanais. They can do anything they want. But at the same time, we would know that it would feel kind of bad if someone tried to steal the reputation of our American viticultural area. I've actually had that experience. I'm over it, but it is something that actually bothers us. So because, back to Pinot Blanc, the reason I think Pinot Blanc drives my imagination so much, it is a non-malolactic, crisp, bright white wine that partly sort of approximates the structure, the acidity, the minerality of a stainless steel Chardonnay. I have been directed as the winemaker at J. Wilkes to make Chardonnays that have a little bit of brown butter, a little bit of richness, and that character and flavor that most people in the broad market in Tulsa and Dallas and Boston or wherever you are, you're going to recognize that's the flavor of Chardonnay that I love. A little bit of oak, a little bit of butter, tiny little, obviously 100% malolactic, crisp, bright, great. J. Wilkes Chardonnay, got it. Stylistically, I think we're rolling. Will I make a stainless steel Chardonnay at J. Wilkes? Heck yes, I will. And I hope it's going to be, I would love to see the first vineyard designated wine under the new J. Wilkes label, because all the wines used to be vineyard designated under Jeff Wilkes. I would love to see a vineyard designated one-off or, every year, talk to Catherine Hall and start bringing in some Clos Pepe Chardonnay and start doing the magic that I used to do with those wines, because I still think those Clos Pepe Chardonnays in the Homage to Chablis program are still some of my favorite Chardonnays. I tend to be pretty, familiarity breeding contempt. I tend to be a little bit highly critical of my own wines. And as a result, could I make better Pinot Noir at Clos Pepe? Of course we could. You do everything you can to make the best craft, but if you're carving something, not every shave is perfect. You try to fix it as much as you can as you go, make it as perfect as you can to begin with, and then obviously do a little bit of revision along the way. So Pinot Blanc to me maybe is the methadone for my stainless steel Chardonnay addiction, is what I'm saying. And it gives me the opportunity to do cold stainless ferments like I always wanted to at Clos Pepe, but I had no temperature control. We had a great winery at Clos Pepe, but we didn't invest in a lot of the really, really expensive bells and whistles like jacketed cold tanks that you can either cool down or heat up. We did have an ozone machine, which we're going to talk a little bit about probably on Friday. By the way, Friday, don't forget, V is for Vino. And Wes on Wine, we're doing a collab. So if you've never watched Vias for Vino on Amazon Prime, it is Amazon's number one. It's Amazon's number one wine show. And Vince, who I've worked with for about 4 years, I think, since he started this damn thing, we're going to get together and we're going to get on Zoom and we're going to drink and we're going to talk. And the subject matter will be 10 things you never knew about wine and why they matter. So I actually didn't know what they were. I started compiling them today. So I've got 3 or 4, and I'm not going to tell you. You have to come in and check it out. All right, 2019 Pinot Blanc. I honestly think this wine will be the best Pinot Blanc we've done since 2015. I can't tell you whether or not I'm going to love it as much as the 2015, because the 15 was the first Pinot Blanc that I made with Clay Brock and our whole winemaking team. To be honest, Clay was like, oh, by the way, Pinot Blanc is like my favorite varietal. So I basically sat back and watched Clay Brock make this Pinot Blanc as integrated as I could be. But at the same time, wow. And 5% Albarino was brilliant. I think that might have been Thomas Vertel who suggested that in the blending of it. We tried a lot of different aromatic wines. Cool thing about aromatic wines, do you know what an Edelsvicker is? Edelsvicker is a German phrase for an aromatic white wine that can have anything in it. It could have Schaurebe, it could have Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Tokay, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc. So it's kind of like a bathtub blend of as many aromatic whites as you want, and the wines are absolutely spectacular. That's a huge question too. Why is there not a more popular idea of blending white varietals into blended white wines? Name a famous aromatic white wine that's blended from various grapes, that doesn't have a dominant grape year by year, that's blended to just make the best aromatic white wine every year. I'm going to make a note. White wine aromatic blend. See the stuff that you guys help me with? I would just be probably watching Netflix and drinking scotch. But no, I've stayed sober enough today that I could present and talk to all you wonderful, wonderful people and give you some ideas, give you some knowledge. And at the same time, here I am getting knowledge myself. Pretty exciting stuff. All right, so I just opened 2016 Pinot Blanc. I did check my entire cellar. Over an hour, I took every bottle down from inside my cellar and searched frantically for some 13 Pinot Blanc, some 14 Pinot Blanc, some 15 Pinot Blanc. It's official. I'm out of it. But the 16 is about to go up on the website. It could even be up there now. As soon as it is up there, I will tell you how to get some. It might be tomorrow, which would be very, very exciting. And we spent a little time talking about the 16 Pinot Blanc once before, but I thought I would open a fresh bottle and revisit. So officially, because I had the 17 just a couple days ago, probably my last bottle, 16, 4 years from vintage date. So this is 2016, 4 years from vintage date. Warm vintage, but not atypically hot. 16 was hotter than 15, 17 was hotter than 16, and then 18 went back to sort of a cool norm, and 19 followed 18. So 18 and 19, cool climate. 15 warm, 16 warmer, 17 arguably hot in the cooler region, Santa Rita Hills, Santa Maria Valley. Beautiful wines though, not so hot that it was just going to burn the fruit and leave you with an ugly wine, but really, really showing incredibly beautifully. But what I was going to say, it's clear now that I've tasted this wine twice from a fresh bottle, that 4 years is the moment where if you want a little bit of kind of like pistachio, kind of almond, hazelnut, but you want that nice sort of apple, pear, especially stone fruit, nectarine, peach, this is the exact perfect moment to drink it. I would say 4 years from vintage date is now going to be sort of my official line for, hey, how long should I lay these Pinot Blancs down? Normally, we look at Pinot Blanc as vin de plaisir, right? French have two types of wine that they describe: vin de plaisir, vin du goutte. Vin de plaisir is rosé. It's just drink it now. Here's some wine. Here's a jug of wine. Here's a bottle of wine. Here's a keg of wine. Go drink it. It's ready to go. Rock and roll, Smashberry Rosé. Have a fun time with it. By the way, Smashberry Rosé, 90 and a Best Buy in the wine enthusiast. So for all of you who pulled the trigger on a $7.50 bottle of rosé, hoping I wasn't throwing shade, well, we just got a great accolade on that wine. We're really happy. It's still for sale at $7.50 a bottle at MillerFamilyWines.com, and you can use the promo code DD50. That'll show my boss that you listened to me, and I had some crazy sort of superliminal influence. Buy wine on you and everybody else. So thanks for all that. Back to Pinot Blanc. So the 2016 will be showing up on the website probably within the next 24 hours. I got a note from Katie who wanted my last notes on it, and I think she's pretty much getting ready to rock and roll on it too. So really exciting, and the moment that it happens, I'll probably talk about it tomorrow and give you guys the good news on a really cool price on a mixed case of all these wines of 2016. Talking without a teleprompter, performing without a net, drinking without a spit bucket. I do this all for your benefit. Isn't that nice of me? That one is good. It's got a viscousness that's developed. I don't remember this wine ever having a slight unctuousness in the mid to back of the palate into the finish. And I would say this wine, if I was served it by the glass at a starred Michelin restaurant and they charged me $25 a glass, I don't think I would blink. I think this wine, I've had 3 wines in a row that are kind of mind-blowing. The Joseph Swan 2012 Gewürztraminer, the 2009 Santa Maria Valley Pinot Blanc, as well as the 2016. I'm thinking the 16 is gorgeous. It's really, really showing beautifully. And I hope you can get this in your glass and share it with me, because we will do another tasting of this once we send it out, because I want you to taste this, put it in your glass, and talk to me about what you think. Oh, what the hell? I'm in an opening mood. It's Monday. I can get through these wines, right? So let's just do the 18, because the 18 is a little atypical. Remember on the show, I try to prove to you that my evaluation and discussion of these wines is honest by virtue of giving you comments and commentary that you might not hear from another commercial winemaker on the internet. And that is, the 18 is not necessarily all Miller Family Wine Company doing. The 18, we ended up looking at our 18 production. Originally, we thought we weren't going to have to make too much Pinot Blanc because sales were a little meh. They weren't as good as we would have liked. Kind of a weak economy. Pinot Blanc was still moving through. It's still one of our best sellers, but we didn't need as much 18 as we thought. When we finally found out how much Pinot Blanc was actually selling in the market and how we were basically a little bit screwed because we didn't have enough Pinot Blanc for all you fine folk who need Pinot Blanc all the time. We actually asked Jed Steele if we could buy some of the Pinot Blanc back from him to blend with the wine that we made at the Miller Family Wine Company and at J. Wilkes. And he said, sure, we've been selling him grapes from Villacido probably, longer than I've been in the wine business. So we did bring some of this Steele Pinot Blanc back to blend with the J. Wilkes. So we have a legend in winemaking, Jed Steele, and an up-and-comer at 51 years old, doing what I can to try to make the best wines I can. And it's kind of a collab. So I like that idea that it's about two-thirds kind of Miller Family Wine Company, Wes Hagen, Clay Brock and Company, and about one-third Jed Steele. So I will say that Jed does allow his Pinot Blanc to go through partial malolactic and some malolactic, and as a result, does that make for a confused wine? No, I don't think so. I definitely see a difference in style, but it's fun to ride the stylistic wave of all these wines. If every single Pinot Blanc was kind of, when it was released, tasted exactly like every other Pinot Blanc we make, that's not sexy. That's not fun. So let's mix it up. Let's have some fun. It's funny because if I put the 18, is it closer to the 16 or the 19? It's closer to the 16 because of the malolactic fermentation that has occurred in the small amount of wine that we bought back from the winemaker I spoke of. I think this wine shows a little more lactic character, which I'm picking up as nuttiness right now. A little bit more of that. This wine does seem to show both of its component parts, and they're both fighting in a really beautiful way. Tension. Why are Disney movies generally so good? Because, well, a parent dies in the first 10 minutes every time, and then there's always a fantastic bad guy. So if you have a great, antagonist and you have great tension in your narrative, I look at winemaking. I'm a creative writing major. I went to University of Redlands and got my degree so I could get out and write novels. Turns out my novels weren't as good as I was hoping, and they weren't picked up, and I didn't make millions of dollars so I could open up my own disc golf course and disc golf camp. But that being said, now that I'm a winemaker and hopefully your winemaker, I want to be your winemaker. I think that now that I am right down in the middle of it, I do love that idea of narrative structure in wine. What makes a good story? Good middle, or beginning, middle, and an end. Put in a great antagonist, a believable protagonist who somehow has to change, has to travel, has to be basically somehow challenged, tortured, rises above, goes beyond what they thought they could do. I call it basically, sort of the Hobbit corollary. Walk very slowly towards Mount Doom, get there, almost die, throw a ring in, boom, the eagles take you away, and it was just like, wow, that was a lot. That was a big story with a lot of problems to get through. So that being said, the 18 has tension. The 18 has tension between the small amount of Pinot Blanc that maybe even saw some neutral barrels, and the ones that we made stainless steel with our normal production methods. So I do think 18 will always be an outlier. It's going to be tough for me to tell you that if 18 is completely your absolute, that's your jam, you might want to buy a lot of 18, because I don't see this style returning anytime soon, because I never foresee us going to a partial malolactic style. I never see us putting any Pinot Blanc in French oak. Of course, I don't think this French oak shows at all. I get no wood whatsoever. Is there a hint of vanilla? Doesn't matter. It's delicious, right? We don't worry about what we say about wine. We worry about what we say when we drink wine. Great wine should lead to a conversation about everything except ourselves. And great wine should lead to a conversation about everything except itself. We don't need to talk about wine. We want to talk about what we love. We want to talk about our passions and the way we look at life. Super important. So one challenge that I said as I'm drinking this beautiful Pinot Blanc is that I'm hoping that we can discuss aromatic wines. And I would love, and I'm about to take a little break between me tasting the Pinot Blancs and the Gewürztraminer with you, and talking a little bit about aromatic white wines in general, although I think we've been doing that throughout. I would love, absolutely, to know where you are and what you're drinking, for those that have not told me. I see your Nero de Avila. I explained that Pinot Blanc is related to Pinot Grigio because both of them are genetic accessions of Pinot Noir. So Pinot Noir got struck by cosmic rays. Those cosmic rays, man, they messed up their DNA, and when they put the DNA back together, they put in some random genomic material, man, and it turned the grapes white or gray. So yes, Pinot Blanc and Pinot Grigio are both genetic mutations from Pinot Noir. Stan Widger, excellent question. Did I ever try making a Pinot Noir Blanc at the Clos? I did make a rosé. And the problem with the rosé was I couldn't bleed off the juice. Adam Tolmack made a Pinot Noir in 2000 from Clos Pepe Vineyards. And he had never used the vineyard before. So he used his normal routine of making Pinot Noir, which was to bleed off about 10% of the juice at the crusher, take that juice and make some rosé, and then reducing the juice to skin ratio. The juice reduced by 10%, it gives a much higher ratio of skins to juice. So he expected it to be a bigger, richer, darker, more brooding and masculine wine. And I will go back and tell you what Adam Tolmack told me in 2003. I made a mistake. I will never bleed Clos Pepe again. This wine will not be ready for sale for at least 5 to 7 years because it is so tannic. So by bleeding off the juice, he made a mistake. So you never want to bleed juice off of fermentation unless you know what you're aiming to do and you have a relationship with that vineyard and you know how bleeding the juice off is going to react and produce a wine of balance. So he never, and I shared that with all of our producers, Ken Brown, Adam Lee, Brian Loring, basically anyone who would listen to me, I basically let them know, hey, one of our producers bled the juice and it didn't turn out so well. So I never was able to make a rosé from a bleed off. So what I did is try to produce a rosé the correct way, an intentional way. I do not look at rosé, the best rosés of the world. None of them, in my estimation, are a byproduct of the winemaking process. If you take some juice out of a ferment to make that wine better, and then you take that juice, you're taking juice that's going to probably be between 23 and 26 bricks. And you're going to make a rosé that without changing and adding water and acid and everything else you have to do to mess with it, you're going to end up with a rosé over 15.5 to 16% alcohol. Who wants to drink a damn rosé at 15%? I mean, maybe if I'm like 3 drinks behind and I get to a party, I'd love to have a strong glass of rosé. But man, to me, rosé is about rosé all day. It's about rosé being the lager of wine, rosé being the session beverage of wine. To me, 12.9 is a perfect level of alcohol for a rosé, or maybe even lower. Have I had rosés that are great that are 14 or 15? Yes, I have. But generally, when I made a rosé at Clos Pepe, I did something crazy, which is I took a section of the vineyard. You guys may not have known that. And for Clos Pepe fans, this might be interesting. There was a little section of the vineyard right in front of my house, between my house and Highway 246, that basically was on this crazy slope. And that slope was the frost basin of the Santa Rita Hills. That area was frosted more actively than any other area in Santa Barbara County winemaking. We would get frost damage down there sometimes 3-4 years out of 10. When Brian Babcock told me when I moved to the Santa Rita Hills, at Babcock, he's only had frost damage 1 year out of 20. So we had this super low area because frost moves downhill like water. So the lowest part of your vineyard is where the frost is going to accumulate through what's called an advective frost. No, excuse me, a radiation frost. Radiation frost is basically space sucking the heat out of the ground. So no clouds, no fog, open sky, just stars and dudes looking down at you and aliens looking down at you, and the cold air just being sucked into the sky. That is a radiation frost. An advective frost is a large mass of incredibly cold air that moves into a region, and basically you have nothing to do. We had an advective frost in 2008, got down to like 24 degrees, and there's nothing we could do. We turned on the fans, we turned on the sprinklers, we stayed up all night doing everything we could. We still lost the whole crop, which is a problem when you wake up on April 1st, 2008, and you have to go tell your boss with a straight look on your face that we just lost about just under $500,000 worth of fruit in about 2 hours. April Fools? No, sorry, it was a hell of a night. That was bad. But back to the thing. So in this frost area, most of it was Wente clone Chardonnay. So if we lost a little of that Chardonnay, that was normally going to the Brewer Clifton program. So they would kind of write off the problems of the lower area, and the higher areas of that same swale would generally not get frosted, and we'd get a little bit of crop. So the Brewer Clifton boys could still make some wine, and gosh, they made some beautiful Clos Pepe stuff. But the Pinot Noir in that little frost swale, we actually started making rosé out of it. And 2 years in a row, we made an $18 a bottle rosé that after we crunched the numbers, it cost us about $42 a bottle to make an $18 rosé. So because I pruned it for rosé. I farmed it for rosé. I pulled the leaves and did canopy management to get early ripeness, so a lot of flavor at lower bricks and higher acidity. So we were picking these grapes between 19 and 22 bricks and making really, really beautiful rosé. One of the two rosés, because of my lack of technical expertise back in the Clos Pepe days, actually did re-ferment in the bottle and gave a little bit of a spritz. And it was so beautiful. It was just spritzy enough not to push the corks, but spritzy enough to give the wine this beautiful effervescence. And I would always say, I didn't mean for it to sparkle. So it's $18 bottle of wine. If I meant it to sparkle, I would charge you $50 for this. And it was a funny little sales line, but it was really beautiful. But it was 100% Pinot Noir rosé that we were selling for half of what it cost to make it, which, for a small production, family winemaker, that's pretty much, par for the course. But in the end, we decided to stop doing that. And I did make a Mourvèdre rosé one of the last years, 13, I think, for Axis Mundi, which was beautiful. Interestingly enough, after we stopped using that section of the vineyard for rosé, what did we do with it? Well, we knocked on Norm Yost's door at Flying Goat Cellars next door at Lompoc, who shared a winemaking facility, industrial plaza with us. He had his own specified space, as did we. Hey, Norm. Yeah, what's up? You're making such beautiful sparkling wine by hand, bottle conditioned, hand disgorged, hand everything. Would you be willing to make a Clos Pepe Blanc de Noir? And he said, well, sure, I would love to. What do you want for it? And I said, well, what's fair? And lo and behold, he said something we weren't ready for. How about if I give you half of the wine back finished in bottles without labels? And you can slap your own label on it. Just say it was vinted at Flying Goat, and you can say whatever you want. So we wrote the little back label. We put a beautiful front label on it, a special label so they would stay good and stay affixed to the bottle within an ice bucket. And that is the story of how we got to the Clos Pepe goat bubbles. And that's also a really, really good question. Is rosé an aromatic wine? I want to say yes. I want to say that it is an aromatic white wine. It's a beautiful wine, and I think that rosé to me checks all the boxes of what I want. Warm day, check. Crisp and bright, check. Full of aromas that make me feel like I'm drinking something delicious, check. Pink color, okay. It's not an aromatic white; it's an aromatic pink. But you know what? I'm going to just go ahead and push to include delicious rosé wine as a part of the aromatic white wine stuff. Cool. So I'm looking forward. Let's see. And again, Brett was asking what I was drinking. I started with a 2012 Joseph Swan Gewürztraminer. I think, thank you very much, Ron Randra. Profound. I don't call my own wines profound. I might find them amazing. I just don't want to go hyperbole on them. There's no hyperbole saying that Joseph Swan 2012 Gewürztraminer is not one of the greatest aged aromatic whites I've ever had. 2019 Pinot Blanc. We're talking about aromatic whites, Brett. A little worse for wear after a full week of being in the fridge, but actually still quite drinkable and still quite nice. Then I moved to the 2016 Pinot Blanc, which I have to think of another word because I promised I wouldn't use the P word. One of the best aromatic white wines I have been affiliated with the production of. Truly special, and I can't wait until we put that wine on sale, if it's not on sale yet. I can't wait till you guys get it at your house so we can all drink it together. I think you guys are going to enjoy it, enjoy the heck out of it. All right, let's take a quick look what else we got going on. And petrol like Riesling, yes. I spent some time in Alsace talking to some winemakers there, and Marcel, who makes really some of the most beautiful Alsatian wines in the world, told me that they don't like to call it a diesel character. They think that's really kind of rude. They prefer a mineral character, and he said that classic mineral aroma that I define as a petrol or a diesel aroma comes from grit soil. And I thought this was, for the next years after Marcel Dice told me that, I took it sort of as gospel and brought it to a number until I started tasting aromatic white wines that were this mineral, slightly petrol or diesel unctuousness that I did not, and that I knew had no granitic soil whatsoever. So even though that's a nice myth that maybe granitic soil has some exchange capacity between the roots and the soil that somehow thickens the skins or has impact that does produce wines that have a tendency to be more mineral, and maybe that are more mineral have a tendency when they're to be a little funky and diesely. It's about the best I can come up with. It's funny because cool thing about aromatic white wines, I mean, you think other kind of showy wines. You think about white, showy, sweet, hated by geeks. Most off dry. You think of it is all about the focus of aromatic, like perhaps like rom. Generally not appreciated by geeks as much as other styles of wines that we make, but Riesling probably has more of a geek following white varietal in the world. If you had to say what are the varietals in the world, white and red, I have to Pinot Noir and Riesling. Incredibly, I mean, you could argue Chardonnay, but Chardonnay. I mean, what other wine produces? What other grape produces the most expensive, wanted, white wine in the world, Montrachet, and also produces like a $2 Chuck Chardonnay that don't really excite anybody. So Chardonnay is so all over the place. I have to say Riesling, generally people produce Riesling are probably a little bit more driven to produce high-end wines than your normal producer of Chardonnay. Maybe Chardonnays produced in the world are commodity. You can't Riesling. If you wanted to go out there and produce a, sort of a commercial sort of cheap Riesling just to change the world, I guess you're Charles Smith and it's called Kung Fu. But again, it is what it is. And I think that Riesling, even though there are Rieslings, I'm just going to go ahead and say Riesling is the geekiest white wine varietal in the world. If you disagree with me, let me know. I will not embarrass you. I will say we disagree. So I would love to hear. Cool. King Family Vineyards, Virginia, Viognier from Bob. Yes, Virginia, Viognier. How lovely we have a grape on the East Coast. I don't know how it handles, black rock, Japanese beetle, and if you don't know how difficult it is to grow grapes on the East United States, I recommend going back and starting with Thomas Jefferson's journals and how passionate he was about producing wine in the New World, into this new experiment. First time in the world that there was no king, queen, but a constitutional, setup where he could grow it. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. Didn't work at all. All right. So Jolie's gotten the what? Yeah, the Biennacido 2005. Gracious, Jolie, that's amazing. Yeah, a little bit of that Bloody Mary character. I do get that. The little celery salt to make in. It's funny because that's very close to the way I described it. Hopefully it still has enough sort of primary fruit to keep it. Last time I tasted the 2005 Wilkes Pinot Noir, made by Jeff Wilkes himself, by the way. We bottles left and sold them at the tasting room. Looks like Jolie scored one. Somewhere in my site has wines. It has a really cool, almost looks like a Western train ticket. Cool that you have that. I vote to have co-host an upcoming day drinking. I agree, Keith. We had a great on our Zoom tasting when Chanda was there, and trust me, she's a hell of a lot easier to look at than me. Yeah, good call, Stan. I had asked a long time. Name me a well-known, famous mixed blend of aromatic white wine, and Conundrum is. I would argue Conundrum also is off dry. It's not a dry aromatic white wine, but certainly you are absolutely right. And those Conundrum wines are interesting. They actually used to use a lot of the Chardonnay, Clark and Telegraph to make that. Before, I think now most of that stuff has been grafted over to Pinot for the Clark and Telephone. Excuse me, Clark and Telephone wines from Belglas. By the corner of Clark and Telephone is not the Clark and Telephone vineyard. On the corner of Clark and Solomon Hills, owned by the Miller family. Fortunately, we've always had a really good relationship with the Wagners, and we have never sent them a cease, because farmers should take care of other farmers about this stuff and be cool about it. Michelle's talking about Black Ankle, who made that beautiful wine from the Piemonte in Maryland, and she's talking about the aromatic white called Bedlam. One of my favorite words comes from the first chapter of the part of David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas, where he says, "I fear he is Bedlamite." And I never heard, there's two words that he introduced me to with the "ite" on the end. Is a Bedlamite, which is someone who thrives. Well, you could argue that no, I won't go there. A Bedlamite is someone who basically thrives on the chaos of saying and doing great things for effect. Bedlam. If you're a Bedlamite, you are constantly attempting to throw bed in the world and to laugh as the world really cries, dies, and suffers. So that's a Bedlamite. The other one was an Anchorite. What an Anchorite is, it's really kind of weird. Used to actually, when they built a nunnery or a church or a cathedral, sometimes they would actually take a virgin woman or some other person, and they would actually put them into a space and build a room around them, and die, and their soul would protect the building. It was an Anchorite. So it would basically be someone who was basically either buried alive in the foundation or buried dead in the foundation, so their spirit would actually protect the place. I think that's what an Anchorite is, as far as I can remember. Why do we talk about Anchorites? Who knows? On we go! 2018, 10% Muscat. Muscat! I could talk about Muscat. So Muscat is an incredibly Muscat of Alexandria is one of the oldest varieties in the world. Why is Muscat called Muscat? Mosca. Fly. Because if you have ever seen crushed orange Muscat, or if you have ever crushed any type of Muscat as a winemaker, you know it's incredibly dangerous, because the moment the winds break, the yellow jackets, the bees, the flies, everything just... Never seen so many insects in your life. Nothing attracts insects more than crushing Muscat grapes, as far as so as a result, I'm allergic to bee stings, or I was. I don't know if I still am, but I'm incredibly careful around Muscat. It does bring all the bees to the yard. It's true. It smells, and they love the smell. Muscat. Delicious wine, and certainly a grape that's incredibly honeyed and prime. You know, when I think about floral prime grapes, I think Muscat might be just absolutely right the most. In fact, it's so slutty that you can't take Muscat seriously. A Moscato, you know, I mean, I love to drink Moscato. Hard to find a dry one. I used to drink a lot of Moscato just because I found it as pleasurable as, you know, more pleasurable soda. If I wanted something a little sweet, I just drink Moscato. Unfortunately, it wrapped out on me, and I can't do that anymore. Lovely. Palmina has white that's a blend of Arnase, Tokai Friano, and Riesling. There we go. Clifton would have the answer. If you do not know Palmino wines in Lompoc, then you're missing out on one of my top three in Lompoc, for sure, even in Santa Barbara. I think Steve Clifton, what he's doing with Italian varieties and what he's doing with Pinot Noir Lavoie is nothing short of extraordinary. So he's always been incredibly kind to me, supportive in my wine. Go Steve Clifton. Go Palmino. Oh, the mixed case. Jackson says the mixed case is up on JWAM under wines. So that you can get a 6-pack of Zinfandel and a 6-pack of the for $150 all in, which is $12.50 a bottle. So just so you know, you're looking almost 50% off if you buy the case. Singles are up, but I'll definitely check it out. DD50 for your promo code. See if it can get cheaper shipping, which it should. You can also match. Throw some J. Wilkes wines in there. Case of J. Wilkes, $10 flat rate shipping. Unless you're in the wine club, then I think it's 1 cent. Join the wine club, by the way. It's definitely worth your while. And if you were there on Friday, we had a great wine club sort of get together and hang out. It was absolutely cool. All right, so now the question is, what I'm pouring for myself. Going back to the 18 Pinot Blanc, to be honest, I thought 16. Showing a little more character than when I first put my nose in it. If I would have sometimes when I go back to it after I've eaten like my first oyster, I go back to the glass and say, God darn it, glass, because my glass actually smells like oyster. I noticed as I've been trying to getting it some air, as it's warming up, it has a saline edge to it. Kind of like a clean ocean breeze, not low tide, but like that aroma you get as you come over the Guadalupe dunes and you get that first hit from the Pacific Ocean. This is a really important part of being a West Coaster, because those of us who made it to California back in the day, the Intrepid, I mean, we basically crossed the entire country. We went over the Rocky Mountains. We went through the deserts. We made it to the California, and we finally relaxed and said, this is herb. And when you get that aroma of Pacific Ocean breeze just hitting your face with a little bit of salinity and just that character, that's what I think of ultimate minerality in a Pinot Blanc or an aromatic wine. It's beautiful that way. Okay, so it looks like the case deal is up, but you cannot order them a la carte. We'll make sure that you can order them a la carte too, because I'd like you to be able to produce your own cases. Chances are you won't get the same discount, but we'll make sure we do something nice for you. Thank you very much, Keith, for letting me know that, because then I'm able to, without stopping, let everybody know that it's up there. By the way, we are about 10 cases of Zin and about 12 to 15 cases of the 16. These are incredibly limited wines, and I say probably within, depending on how sales. If it might last until mid next month, but if they go fast, they could be gone very soon. So I want to try the 16 Pinot Blanc and the 16 Zin. It's a great idea to jump in and. All right, let's check to make sure. I did see that Beth Ladd came in, who was junior high Foothill School graduate and someone who was choral music with me back before being a choir geek was any type of cool. John Brownhouse, Josh Cohn is here. Josh, welcome. We got Fred. Fred's asking, who's my neighbor, what I think about Roussanne. If it's real Roussanne, I don't know if it's Marsanne. I can't tell the difference. Honestly, if you put a Roussanne and a Marsanne in front of me, I'm 50-50 whether I can decide, because I think Roussanne and Marsanne have been very confused genetically. Roussanne, I believe, and Marsanne, I'm just going to say fringe aromatic, white aromatic Rhone, from the Rhone Peak Pool. Roussanne, Marsanne, what I love about them is their structure, their oiliness, their ability to age. And I would say, 3 of the most profound white wines I've ever had have been Northern Rhone whites, with about 10 years from vineyards like generally Hermitage, which should be, I believe, dominant. I need to do more study on Roussanne versus Marsanne and teach my palate how to tell the difference, because I will be absolutely, I could not tell. So there you go. I know, me too, Don. Don said, jealous of Jolie. Jolie, if you have any other comments about that wine, I know that calling a wine smells like a Bloody Mary with a little celery salt, but I think both of those aromatic principles that she's discussing do occur in Santa Maria Valley wine. So I would love to know. Yeah, talking about getting stung. Last press some muscat. That is the price of what we do. Unfortunately, Interestingly, I went to I was actually my first day in the wine industry, which was around I think July 1996. Basically, was the exact same day that Joey Tensley's first in the wine industry, because we both went to work the same day for the same boss, Brian Babcock, vintage 1996. So you cannot argue that either Joey or I have more experience in Santa Barbara. Literally, we have to the day exactly the same. Oh, Ari's here. Very nice. Mai Tai, much love. I wish I could drink stuff with juice in it, without my blood sugar. Mai Tais are just delicious. My problem with cocktails is I just really love the flavor of neat liquor, and as a result, buy really, really high end good. I don't drink it very often, so it's like a little bit of Tobola mezcal, or a little bit of Fortaleza, or a little bit of Redbreast 12, or some Highland Parteen, or whatever Jolie last time we hung out. Okay, cool. Delicious white blend in your area was the Dolfonzo Curran Borderlands White GB Blanc, who basically you could probably that Chris Curran single-handedly brought Grenache Blanc to Santa Barbara County. Someone had to plant it, but so Grenache Blanc, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, Viognier, and Gewürztraminer was definitely decided on for lunch in the Dolfonzo Curran world. But I bet it's delicious. That's awesome. Oh, so Bruce has got his freaking bonehead. How awesome. François Denis, Claire Saint-Aubin, Premier Cru, and Remilly. I don't know, but it sounds absolutely delicious, and now I want to speak. Candy Crawford's in the house. So lovely to see you guys. I love a good Mai Tai too. I always loved passion fruit, orange, and guava juice, the Pog. I never got Pogs out of it, but it was always one of my favorites. The one thing that I'm most upset about being because I don't get to drink juice with my toast in the morning. Blanc, drink now until, okay, I'm going to go the 19 is going to, I'm going to say, so 4 years date. My idea is 4 years from vintage on J. Wilkes Pinot Blanc, because they're all from the same source, old vine, 47-year-old Pinot Blanc vines at Biendecito. I'm going to go ahead and say that Pinot Blanc can always go 4 years without losing a lot of its primary fruit. So Mark, go ahead and suggest 4 to, and in that 4 to 10, go to 10 really, because it's delicious to drink now. You shouldn't be drinking current release Pinot Blanc. If you want a little nuttiness, if you want a little of the complexity out of the 2006 vintage date, I think is optimal for most drinkers and most California wine drinkers. I think Pinot Blanc with 7 years on it. The style would probably be plenty of complexity and plenty of maturity for them. Right. Cool. Keith suggested on Disney Plus. It appears to be sort of semi star film that addresses sort of counterculture. That look a little stony to me, so of course it's going to appeal to part of my personality. So yes, we are going to dig in. I think it's one of 2 Pixar movies. I didn't see Cars 3 in the theater. I didn't see Onward in the theater. So it looks like I love. It has fantasy. It has Pixar, man. Pixar just doesn't. They do a great job. For James, thank you for drinking. Rosé, that is a good rosé. Congratulations, you bought a Best Buy and a 90-point wine. We're very excited that we got that news. Yes, Mark, we're all drinking wine. I should probably put a little bit down my throat. That's good. Mazzi Vermentino. Mazzie. I think it's like the Jacuzzi family and the Mazzi family. There's a connection between California agriculture things and the engine that works a jacuzzi. Somehow they're both integrated in the wine. Dominic is asking me, he sees a certain passion when I talk about white wine. Do whites to red? Okay, here it is. White wine represents twice in modern wines than red, in my estimation. White wines are transparent to the place they're grown and immediately, while red wines, for full enjoyment for me, tend to need 3 to 5 years to integrating, knitting together, and showing some tannin. There is no tannin in Chardonnay, no tannin in Pinot Blanc. There's no tannin in Viognier. Very incredibly small amounts if it was barrel aged. So I find, as I said, I believe that I can tell you 5 times in the last consumed a white wine that was about $30 or more, its current release, that now when I drink it, I can't remember the last I drank an expensive white wine that didn't blow my mind. I can give you 5 last month in March of red wines I drank over $50. So I guess I'm saying that white wine to me is more transparent. It's more transparent to its winemaker, transparent to its terroir, transparent to its farming. Red wine, there's some smoke and mirrors. They're called tannins and phenolic compounds. They constantly playing around. White wine, craft, more care, more skill in the winery, and potentially part of this comes from my love of Santa Rita Hills and Valley Chardonnay. Yes, I'm going to say without a motion that I believe white wine is a better value than red, and it sparks my imagination a little bit more too. That was a good question, Dom. Thank you. Calling you Dom. Audio, if it's for everybody. I do notice a little of me seeming to cut in and out on the, and I'll reset the internet for next time. I apologize. Oh, Anne Marie, you're having some Montemar and Cantata. Let's go ahead. Yet another toast. Oops. Go for a little bit more of that Gewürztraminer. Steve Arrowwood. Thank you, Steve, for your conversations about everything from music to Colombia to all of your passions. Let's just remember this is a miracle and take a bit of love we have for the world and make sure it gets into the world to the people that deserve it. And the people screw them, man. What a beautiful, slightly old wine. Is it too old? Not really. But damn, is that good. All right, I'm going to do a check, make sure I'm caught up. Sorry. I'll make sure I reset my internet and everything from time, and I apologize. For once, maybe the feed was actually better, but thank you guys so much. Popular day for Monday, virtual happy hours. Yeah, you know, I did get some day drinking done over the weekend. So I wanted you guys to be proud. So beautiful thing. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, another episode of Day Drinking with Wes Hagen in the can. I hope you learned something about aromatic whites. If you have other questions, I wake up every morning with my coffee, looking at all your comments and who came in and visited. Remember, every one of these is actually basically libraried. I just invented a verb. We're all keeping every single one of these shows on YouTube, either Wilkes Wines YouTube channel or the Miller Family Wine Company channel. I will finish by suggesting you've got about another 16 or 17 March 15th is the hard deadline for the end of the 50% sale. So this would be a great time for cases of the Smashberry Rosé or the Barrel Cabernet, Ballard Lane, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. Smashberry cans are currently being put back as soon as we figure out a better way to ship them. A couple little issues with shipping. And then I just wanted to let you guys know, for those of you who are isolation without a lot of people in your house, thinking about you, we care about you. Realize in just hopefully a few months, we will be active in the world, operating, talking, eating, doing winemaker dinners, having fun. So fret not, we're here for you. Those of you with people in your house, chill the hell out and remember everything that matters. This is something really, my wife and I have begun a new workout regime. We figure if people get out of prison ripped, we should get out of being sequestered ripped. So we are working out incredibly hard, 3 to 4 times a week. And what I found is, as my wife was personal trainer Chanda, but also producer Chanda, has been incredibly kind and gentle with me because I have no kinesthetic sense. Believe it or not, I just learned to use my hips independently of my body 2 days ago, and it took almost 2 weeks of work. So I'm learning how it works, how my body works, and thank you to my wife. But what I found is when we worked, I was basically yelling at her because I had no sense of where my body was. So she would tell me to do this, do that. I'm trying. At the first week of our working out, I was such a jerk. I insisted to understand that what I needed was support and love and a teacher. And now this week, we are having a much, much better time communicating and being together. So be conscious of every word that comes out of your mouth. And it's very easy in these frustrating moments to say something. So try to lead with kindness, understanding, lead with how can I flourish? And the way that I'm going to make our household flourish is I'm going to listen twice as hard to my wife. I'm going to understand what she says, analyze it, and I'm going to make sure she realizes we're in these difficult times that at least I'm her. So I normally say, find someone who needs your help in your community, in your social circle, and support them. And I still say that. I will also say, with the little rugrats and grommets running around your house, with wives, husbands, boyfriends, whoever's with you, girlfriends, take the time when you feel like saying something snarky. I'm not perfect. Trust me, if producer Chanda was here, she'd be nodding, red hair and head. He is not an easy man to live with, but I'm trying, and I want to do better. Be physical. You can to be at the end of this. Love the people you're with, love the wines you're with. All of these things are so important. So I hope you had a good time tonight. I will see you tomorrow, and don't forget with Vias for Vino, and Wes on Wine collab. It's going to be crazy. Tomorrow we are doing Zinfandel, Petit Syrah, and Alicante. So what I want to talk about tomorrow is California heritage varieties and the varieties that we really put as workhorse varietals in Kenya. If you didn't know, Zin and Alicante Boucher, as well, Petit Syrah, really do produce a lot of the wines that go out as sort of bulk wine. So I want to talk about these varietals. How important are they as bulk? Also, what are the best examples being made in the United States? So come in at Alicante Boucher. Let's talk about Zin. Obviously, talk about Petit Syrah and get understanding a little bit more about wine and ourselves. So I remember, encourage, read as much as you can, and trust in science. All right, we'll talk to you guys soon. Good night. Cheers.